And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Podcast on the Brink, your weekly dose of Indiana University basketball news and discussion. I'm your host, Jerod Morris. Podcast on the Brink is a joint production of the Assembly Call and Inside the Hall. For complete coverage of IU basketball, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com.
Hoosier fans, it's Indiana basketball time. IU basketball mini-series tickets are now available in 6-game or 3-game ticket packages, as well as individual games. This is your chance to check out the Hoosiers inside beautiful Simon Scott Assembly Hall. For more information, call or text 812-855-4006 or visit iuhoosiers.com. Go IU.
On this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink, Alex Bozich and I are joined by Eddie Cotton, a senior at the IU Media School who covered Hoosier Hysteria this past weekend for BTN+. He was the sideline reporter. We're going to get some thoughts from Eddie on what he thought about the event, what he thinks of some of the IU newcomers, and all three of us will react to Hoosier Hysteria, give our observations, and look ahead to the season that is coming. Eddie, just an incredibly hard-working student. I think Alex in a chat that we were having described him as the hardest-working IU media student, so really happy to have him on and get his observations on what was a really interesting weekend in Bloomington. Before we get to that, though, we've got kind of an exciting announcement here, which is that we've got a new sponsor. Although it's kind of a new sponsor, but not really a new sponsor, as you'll hear. This week's edition of Podcast on the Brink is brought to you by Home Field. And again, Home Field, technically a new sponsor, but the team behind Home Field is one that we're actually pretty familiar with and that you probably are too if you've been a long-time Podcast on the Brink listener. So this past August, the team over at Hoosier Proud, one of our sponsors last season, took all of their college designs and launched Home Field, a new brand. And at their website, homefieldapparel.com, you'll find the comfiest and most unique officially licensed IU apparel that you can find anywhere. Now, Home Field was started by an IU grad, and all of Home Field's premium collegiate apparel is designed and printed out of Indianapolis. This week, be sure to check out Home Field's IU Champions Tee, featuring the 5 championship years and a vintage IU basketball design. I own this shirt. I bought it. I love it. This is actually the shirt Andy was wearing on our episode of the Assembly Call that we did after Hoosier Hysteria, so it's a great shirt. You definitely want to check that out. And here's the best part. Our friends at Home Field have a special deal for Podcast on the Brink listeners. Use the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, at checkout, and you will get 15% off of your first order at homefieldapparel.com. That's promo code BRINK for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. Home Field, wear one for the team. All right, now here is our conversation with Eddie Cotton about Hoosier Hysteria. And we are here on this week's edition of Podcast on the Brink with a man that some observers have referred to as the hardest working man in IU student media. It's Eddie Cotton. Eddie, what's going on, man? It's nice to have you on the show.
Wow, I wasn't ready for that. That was a big title. I feel like Zach McRoberts. I bet he was not ready for that title either.
Well, now you have to live up to it. So
I'm going to give you some hot takes then.
So we want to talk about Hoosier Hysteria. And you were there, Alex, you were there, I was there. And the place that I want to start is, I was way up in Section K, so I didn't get to, I like going to those events so I can kind of be down closer to the court and see the guys. I didn't really get a chance to do that. But you guys both did. Eddie, you did the sideline reporting for the BTN Plus broadcast. And Alex, obviously, you were there too. So I'll start with Eddie. Just what were kind of your general impressions being up close, seeing the event? Just in terms of, we've heard a lot about the size of the guys. We've heard a lot about the developing team chemistry. Like, what observations did you have from being able to be up close during Hoosier Hysteria?
I feel very odd being able to give takes on this basketball program after what is really realistically a scrimmage and some introductions. But I really feel like I can. Being up and close was very, very unique experience because I got to see, one, you're right, they are all massive in comparison to how they were last year. And that, of course, has to do with the massive freshman class. But the effort level felt different. Like, just during a scrimmage, it felt like Race Thompson and Jake Forrester were fighting for rebounds and fighting to put on a show. And I did not expect that, and I haven't seen that in years prior. And also just the chemistry felt different, not only with the players, but I think the players and Archie Miller. I spent my entire dunk contest experience, rather than actually watching the dunk contest, but watching Archie on the bench, because whenever there's a dunk contest, I always assume the coach is cringing at every play, like every dunk, assuming an injury is going to come. But he was the exact opposite, and I've never actually seen him as happy as I did. And he was going up to Jake after he missed his dunk and asking, like, what was that? And really, like, insinuating that they needed to bring it in the dunk contest. And I haven't seen that fun side of Archie, so I think he's just having more fun with this team than he did last year.
Eddie, from a broadcasting standpoint, this year's Hoosier Hysteria, it was concise. That was one thing I wrote about after it ended. From your perspective, was the flow of the event easier, being someone reporting, on a live broadcast where you didn't have to fill so much time? Did it feel like it flew by? Because I think for those of us in the media who are used to kind of the 3-hour Hoosier Hysterias back when Tom Crean was there, this was kind of a welcome change. So I'm just kind of curious from your perspective if it felt like it went by fast, and how that affected maybe what you were able to do on the broadcast.
Yeah, I would say that the speed of the event didn't perhaps help us as much as one might think, just because there was a lot planned to fit in a very short window of time. So I didn't get much usage in the broadcast as a sideline reporter, because you're trying not to step on the toes of what's going on. And we had interviews with Tyra Buss and Deron Davis that took up a great deal of time. And Deron is hilarious, by the way. He is actually quite the comedic character. And if he wanted to go into media, he probably could. So it was a little difficult to work with. But yeah, it did definitely quickly fly by, and made it a much easier experience for, I guess, every fan there and every media member. And it obviously, it's so weird to harp on how different it is. Like, you don't want to be like Archie Miller is a better coach because he held an hour-long Hoosier Hysteria instead of 3 hours. But it's a bit indicative of the type of person Archie is and kind of the mind he has while kind of controlling this program.
What input, if any, do you get from IU, the athletic department, or media relations, or even the team, like leading into an event like this, or when you broadcast a game for, a regular season game? Do you get any, pregame tidbits? Do you get any information, or is it pretty much just kind of prepare on your own, and you don't really get anything specifically from the program to prepare you for the broadcast?
Well, I think it's a little bit different for me, and I guess Zan, who's doing the call with me, and Sam Niederman, just because I know this team so well, and I know a bunch of the individuals on this team, that JD didn't really have to give me many tidbits. I know he would have, but he just legitimately said to me, just don't mess this up, and I know you won't. But he did look out for us at Media Day to make sure we got all the components we needed. And he's dealing with the fact that it is very concise, and he would like the fact that he gave us Deron Davis, he gave us Tyra Buss, and he would have given me a coach's interview if they didn't have to really quickly bust out of there to do, their jobs. But they're helpful. Yeah, they're very helpful. I think it's just different for me because I already know the tidbits that I need.
You, Eddie, you said you had a chance to talk with with Deron. How did he look? Kind of how was he moving around? How did he look like he was in shape? Like what? Because obviously that's one of the big questions for the season is how quickly he's going to be able to get back. And we've heard a few things here or there, but did you kind of get any type of sense talking with him?
Well, Zan did the talking, which means, and Zan was play-by-play for the event, which means that Deron Davis was seated during the experience. So I didn't really get to see his athleticism, how he's walking. Really just got to see what jokes he makes. But during the broadcast, because it was during the dunk contest, he asked Zan if he was allowed to stand up during dunks because he's so excited, to which he was, and he did that effectively. I'm not going to say that's going to mean he's ready for day one, but if he's been insinuating in media day and then when he was asked about it during the event that he'll be ready for day one, you have to trust that he's saying that, because if you know, everyone knows how college athletic works, and a college SID or media department is not going to let you say to the media, I'm going to be back for day one, if you're not actually going to be back for at least close to day one.
Eddie, how do you feel like he's going to fit in on this team? Let's say he is ready from day one. To me, it feels like this might not be the best situation for him, just kind of based on some of the other pieces that are surrounding him. And also, just from watching the team last year, how different it was after he went out. I'm not going to say that they were better, but they were different in how they like to play. And he's not, I'm a huge proponent of what Duran can bring in terms of a back to the basket post player, but he's not a guy that runs the floor particularly well. And I don't know how he fits in with this team. From your perspective, let's say he is ready to go when the season starts. Where does he fit with this group?
Yeah, I was having the same thought process, and I'm glad now it's been confirmed that it's a normal thought process. I don't think he fits in very many ways other than maybe on a second unit, because the way I foresee kind of the starting lineup to look, I see Juwan Morgan at the 5, and I see Evan Fitzner at the 4, because what he can bring you from 3-point range. And Evan Fitzner's not going to play the 5. Like, I'm very confident he's going to be a stretch 4. He was getting out-rebounded by Jake Forrester in a scrimmage, which, I mean, you can't read too hard into a scrimmage, but you should not be getting boxed out by freshmen. But Evan Fitzner, what he brings you offensively is a different element, and Duran Davis doesn't bring you anything different. Everything Duran brings you, Juwan does, and he does it slightly better, or a lot better based on the scenario. And I don't think Archie wants to play 2 big men at the same time. I don't think that's ideal. So I don't know if he fits anywhere other than on the second unit. I will say that this team does need depth at the front court, so that second unit will be important, because you really don't have a center other than Duran and Juwan. But I don't see the fit, and I much prefer Juwan playing that 5, because it allows you to be more versatile on the break and play almost like he would be played like a Draymond Green type, where you've got that smaller 5 who lets you play small. So I don't know. I really don't think he fits, to be honest. Not to be mean.
Well, I mean, it's a valid question. It's one that everybody's asking. And I think Alex makes a good point that it's not a negative on Duran as an individual player, because he brings a lot of really good things, got a lot better. He's a remarkably efficient offensive player, good defensive rebounder, actually improved in his defensive metrics last year. It's just a question of if he fits with this personnel in this particular system, and that's what'll be interesting to see. This week's edition of Podcast on the Brink is also brought to you by SeatGeek. So let's talk for a minute here about tickets. Getting tickets online can be complicated, way too complicated, as you've probably figured out. If you try to get tickets online, there are tons of sites out there. They all have varying levels of reliability, and yet you know as well as I do the value of being there live, the value of being there in person, so you want to get tickets, you want to go. So the question is, who do you trust? What website are you going to go to get tickets, to get the best prices on tickets, to feel safe, getting tickets? That's why SeatGeek is the place to go. That's why I use SeatGeek. That's why we feel fully comfortable recommending SeatGeek to you. They pull millions of tickets into one place so that you can easily find the seats that you want for a price that you're willing to pay. And that allows you to be there in person and to do it at a good, reasonable price. And the thing about SeatGeek is they're designed, from the ground up, they were designed to make the ticket buying experience easier than ever. They search multiple ticket sites, they grade every ticket based on value, and so they help you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget. So later on the season, if you want to go see IU play Marquette, if you want to go to the Michigan State game toward the end of the year, which might have Big Ten, championship implications, SeatGeek is the place to go. That's certainly where I will be going when I need to get tickets to an IU basketball game, to an IU football game, to a concert, anything. Get the SeatGeek app on your phone. It makes it really easy, makes it really convenient, and also remember to do this since you're a Podcast on the Brink listener. Enter the promo code BRINK, B-R-I-N-K, that's promo code BRINK, and you will get $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. So again, get the app, promo code BRINK, $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. Now back to our conversation. Eddie, you've given us some observations about the scrimmage. I'm curious if you have any others, if any individual players, stood out, any other individual moments that stood out from the scrimmage. We don't want to take too much from a 15-minute scrimmage that had a running clock, but it's all the basketball we have to go on right now, and we have 30 days until the game. So feel free to overreact.
So my quick overreactions are that Clifton Moore might be okay. That's one thing. He might be all right. Because I've had concerns about whether he's going to transfer or not, and just because of how he performed last year, almost felt like he'd be a lost guy on this roster. I think he has a chance to be okay. What that means, I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes a game, but he looks bigger and stronger down low in the post. I think Race Thompson might be a stud. Like, there's a chance he might actually be a stud, which, again, you don't want to harp too much on a scrimmage, but the effort he was putting in, the rebounds he was able to get at his size, because he's only 6'8", which, well, I'm 5'6", so I shouldn't say only 6'8", but he was able to body out guys that were bigger than him, and I think he will be a pest, and he kind of fits the mold of what Zach McRoberts was able to provide last season, of being that pest, that agitator almost, and that's what Archie Miller said in Media Day, that he wants to mix it up with him, but just with a different skill set offensively. And then I'm really all in on Evan Fitzner, because his stroke just looks amazing. I haven't seen that clean of a shot in the Assembly Hall in a long time. I've also only been here a few years, so it's not really a long time, but you know what I mean.
It's been a couple of bad years, Eddie. It's been a couple of bad years that don't have a shooter with a nice stroke like my boy Fitzner over here. But he shoots it nice. And he said to me at media availability, because, of course, the fire alarm that allowed us to have one-on-ones, he said he has pro aspirations. This guy wants to be an NBA basketball player, which I thought was incredibly interesting because he wasn't a starter at St. Mary's. He didn't have a huge role. So to insinuate that, I think he is under the assumption and has been told that he's going to have a bigger role here to show off his skills, and he looked like he had them. And then my last real takeaway is that Jake Forrester looks like he can play freshman year. Jake Forrester was one concern I had coming into this freshman class, whether he would be able to adjust to college basketball quickly, just because he is very lanky and not as strong. But he said at media availability during the week that he's eating 7,500 calories a day, which in no way, shape, or form makes any sense to me, because that's so many calories. But when I saw him when they broke out to 1-on-1s, he was immediately eating Cheez-Its. So he might be eating every 30 minutes. And he looks a lot stronger and a lot bigger than he did coming out of high school. And I think he has a vital role in his ability to just grab rebounds and put them right back up. That's it. Just grab rebounds, put them right back up. Don't do anything else. And you need that on any basketball team.
It's interesting, Eddie, that you mentioned Clifton Moore as a guy who could potentially, be something on this team. And I think the biggest question I'm getting, I on our forum, I do like a monthly kind of Q&A where people can ask questions. And I think the question that I'm asked the most frequently, and I've gotten it pretty much every month this offseason, is who do you think is going to be in the rotation and how many guys is Indiana going to play? And the reason I bring up your comments on Clifton Moore is, if I'm making a list right now, 1 to 14 of this team, he's probably somewhere in my bottom 2 or 3. And I don't think Archie's going to play more than 9 or 10 guys. So how do you think the numbers work for this team? I mean, there's not too many examples that I can think of for a college basketball team in recent memory, besides maybe the Kentucky team that was 38-2, where they just kind of shuffled guys in and out. But there's going to be some odd men out on this team. And I think one of the more fascinating storylines is going to be how it all works itself out. How do you see the rotation shaping up, at least to start the season?
I think to start the season, you're obviously looking at experience other than Romeo. Romeo is treated as a senior superstar, even though he's not. But I think you lean towards experience early on, especially with the fact that the freshman class is still adjusting to the backline defense. You might see a lot more of Zach McRoberts early on than you will later on in the season. But again, Jerod, we talked about this the other day when you were on the Hoosier Network podcast. Indiana basketball fans just innately trust Archie Miller, and I'm very much in that same boat, whether I'm considered a fan or not, because I'm covering this team. And I think I trust Archie to kind of have a different rotation based on the opponent. And I don't think you would have expected that out of Tom Crean, and I don't think a lot of coaches want to go with that perspective. I mean, I remember when Duke came to town and Coach K was asked about his bench, and he said, I only care about my 5 starters. Like, that's it. Those are the 5 starters I need. But I think Archie Miller will read situations, and if a team needs Indiana to go big to match them, or he sees an opening going big, I think that's where Clifton Moore will find time. I don't think he'll play much if this team needs to run and needs to play small. It's hard because you look at each individual on this team and you see guys that could play college basketball. And it really will just come down to, I think, situations and defensive expectations. Because if you don't know the backline defense and you're not ready to play the backline defense, you're not playing. I think that's the number one rule. So some of my question marks are like guys like Demezy Anderson. Like, I don't know if he'll be ready to fit, because I know he said he talked to the media during the week about the fact that he's kind of struggling a bit early on just because he hasn't had guys to pass to before in his high school career. I have a little bit of concern with Jerome. I think Jerome's going to be a superstar. I just don't think it'll be quite early. I think he's going to need 10 or so college basketball games to really get adjusted. But I don't know. It's really going to come down to, do you know the pack line defense, in my opinion, just because that's the biggest thing that matters to Archie.
Yeah. So let's talk about the recruiting side of Hoosier Hysteria, because as much as we want to, talk about the scrimmage and all that stuff, I mean, we know that one of the most important purposes of Hoosier Hysteria is to be a recruiting event. So, I don't know how much you paid attention to the recruits or kind of saw them, but did you have any observations there? And in particular, from a coach's perspective, how much time were they spending with the team and focused on the team, and how much time, if at all, were they interacting with recruits during the actual Hoosier Hysteria event?
Am I allowed to talk about this? I never know.
Oh, I don't know.
Alex, you would know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, if it happened in plain sight, then I think it's good to go. Just use your best judgment. We trust you.
Okay. Well, my best judgment tells me that other than smiling all the time during the dunk contest, after every dunk, Archie would turn around and just make a joke to Trace Jackson Davis, and they would just be laughing back and forth. So I think he focused a lot of time on the recruits, which he should have, and it was justified. And it based on being an awkward guy just staring at them, it looks like they have a very good relationship established, at least him and Trace. And I know that Trace and Keon are very close. And of course, we saw the social media pitches for coming from Armand Franklin that seemed to gather a lot of support. And this whole time, there has been always this huge momentum around Trace Jackson Davis and Keon Brooks that I think only slowed a bit because Keon and Trace took a visit to UCLA and have kind of garnered more attention as we get closer to their commitment. But I think a great deal of time was spent into just building relationships with these guys that look like they were already there. And you saw some of the players as well interact with them. And I mean, I just saw a bunch of laughs. That's all I saw. And even after Hoosier Hysteria was over, I was still there 30, 40 minutes after. And I mean, all three of them looked very comfortable to be there, taking a bunch of pictures with fans and talking with Ostrom, who was there, while the other coaches were off doing something, I guess, preparing for what they were going to do with the rest of their visit. But it seems like their relationships are clear. And I don't know what the other factors will be in their decisions, but if it comes down to people you appreciate and an experience you appreciate, I think Indiana somewhat has established themselves in a very good place.
One question I've gotten a lot, I don't know the answer to it, and Eddie, let me know if you know. Alex, let me know if you know. Last year at Hoosier Hysteria, it was kind of a big deal how the players walked across the court and kind of got their opportunity for this big ovation. They couldn't be announced, but, IU fans knew who they were. And I feel like a lot of fans were waiting for that to happen at Hoosier Hysteria, but it didn't happen. They walked out of the locker room area and just kind of walked along the side to their seats as opposed to all the way across the court. Do you know at all why that change was made this year to not do the full walk across?
I'm pretty sure it's not allowed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe that's why.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to draw attention to them. But I will say that they were brought in, and there was one section in the student section that was completely empty all leading up to Hoosier Hysteria. So I had no idea who was sitting there. I thought maybe they were going to randomly put the band in the student section. It was about a block of 40 seats. And out of nowhere, I just see Trace and Keon all coming in with their family, and they just situated themselves right in the middle of the entire fan section, pretty much with the anticipation, I think, that as they were walking up the steps, they would pretty much get a high five from every person or a cheer from every person. So it was a more individualized experience now, because now you're walking amongst the fans rather than just getting cheered on from afar.
That makes sense.
And then 20 minutes later, they just left that section to sit next to Archie. So I don't even get what the point was.
Well, and I thought they were up there to see the light show better because it was probably better.
Oh, yeah. That's probably what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like they didn't walk them in, but it just wasn't straight down the middle of the court. I mean, they did walk along the sideline. There was people on the IU support staff that were kind of directing them up to their seat. And then they, like you said, they stayed there, I think, till the light show was over. Obviously, that was the side where it was easiest to see. If they would have been on the other side, everything would have been upside down, and they would have been probably too close to the floor. So I think they kind of set that section aside to give them the best seats. And then once it ended, slowly but surely, they kind of made their way down to behind the bench area. But I think that's a gray area in terms of walking them across the court. I don't necessarily think that it's not allowed, but I think it's possible that maybe somebody complained about it from another school, and I'm not saying I know that for a fact, but I'm just saying that's something that could have happened when you're kind of walking kids across the court to an event that are recruits. So it's probably an area in this current environment that you want to stay out of. Anything that can draw negative attention to you is not going to be a positive thing. So probably more or less erring on the side of caution than anything else.
But I guess if you're going to do it once, do it during Romeo's Hoosier Hysteria.
Yeah, that's the one. It's really like poking the bear almost. You don't need to do that. So let's just heed from it.
Yeah. Alex, did you want to hop in with a question?
No, I mean, overall, Eddie, I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, this season, what are your expectations for this team? I mean, is it, do you fall in line with, this is a team that could contend for the Big Ten? Do you think it's maybe in that second group of tier of Big Ten teams? Because to me, going into the season, all these projections that Michigan State's going to win the league, I'm not sure that I buy those from the perspective of they just lost their two most talented players. I think that's putting a lot of faith in Tom Izzo, which he deserves a lot of that, but also, I don't necessarily buy Michigan State as a clear-cut favorite to win the league. So I'm just kind of curious where you see Indiana fitting in from a Big Ten perspective as the season approaches.
Well, one, I don't know if I agree with your sentiment that Tom Izzo deserves that almost expected respect, because last year he completely misplayed Miles Bridges and completely misutilized Jaren Jackson, and that should have been a Final Four team. So last year was probably one of his worst coaching jobs I've seen. So I don't know.
They did still go 30-5 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I still think they had completely underperformed and they misutilized their players. So which is weird to say. You go 30-5 and you underperform, but that team was so talented and it felt misused. But now when I say they were so talented, now they're not. You lose that talent in going into the NBA, and I think you look at this Indiana team, and it's the same thing we were saying 4 months ago when Romeo Langford commits. The ceiling is extremely high, and the floor is seemingly at the edge of being a bubble team, and that's just under the assumption that you don't get the improvements out of the players that are returning that you would have expected. I think a lot will come down to the play of Devontae Green. If Devontae Green plays that point guard position like Archie Miller has been harping and saying he has been in practice, because the biggest question around Devontae Green is his consistency, because there will be some games he shows up and he's good Devontae Green, some games he'll show up and he'll have 4 turnovers in the first half. And Archie just said he was the most consistent practice player all offseason. If that comes to fruition, then this team can definitely contend for a Big Ten title and actually cause chaos in the tournament because of the rest of the talent and length. I think the biggest thing is that this team is situated to play Archie's style of basketball, and last year's team was absolutely not, because they didn't have any of the size on the wing. They couldn't really run the pack line defense effectively, and yet their defense was still pretty good without the size that they needed. They have everything they need. They just need a point guard that will step up. And if it's not Devontae Green, I really don't think it's Al Durham, unfortunately for Al. And I don't know how long it's going to take Rob to get ready, just because he is tinier and he's going to have to deal with the size that is in the Big Ten. And it takes some time to get used to that. But I know he has a high IQ, so he could get adjusted at some point. But it really will come down to point guard play for me.
Eddie, we know that, kind of the older IU fans are fully bought into Archie Miller's program, very, very excited about this season. What is the feeling on campus about this team? Because it's now been 2 years since Indiana's made an NCAA tournament, so I'm sure that has kind of lessened the excitement a little bit, but now you've got, a coach in his second year, Romeo Langford's there. Is the excitement back among the students, or is there at all still kind of a show me before we get, kind of the full embrace of this team from the student body?
Well, the student body is an interesting dynamic that I think people have kind of dived into at times in more of an aggressive manner than I will. But there is the breakdown of the informed audience and the uninformed audience that all fit into an Indiana basketball fan base. Because the uninformed audience is the out-of-state kids, which includes myself. I just decided to become as informed as possible as quickly as possible. But they remain somewhat uninformed, and all they know is Romeo Langford, and that's the result of bringing in such a national name in Romeo Langford, is that you get kids that know not that much about the history and the results of this program, and you just hear Romeo Langford and you go, I think Indiana basketball could win it all. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And then you have the informed audience that I think clearly saw progress last season and here's again the same exact name in Romeo Langford, and then throws in Jerome Hunter, who's a top 50 recruit, throws in Rob Finney, throws in that entire recruiting class and goes, yeah, this team could cause problems for others. So I think you're at a point now where the entire campus is unified in their excitement, just the reasons behind it are different. And you notice that around campus, and from just the people I've talked to, every time I talk to someone and tell them I cover the team, they always ask, have you met Romeo? Have you met him? What's he like? And so to have people that don't know much about Indiana basketball to say that, I think it warrants the assumption that everyone is expecting a big season.
Well, have you met Romeo? What's he like?
I have only seen Romeo walking across the street a few times, and every time he is right next to Rob Finney. And it's kind of like a stoic experience because he's just so calm, And you notice that at media day, he's not a great quote, which is fair to him because he's a freshman, and also fair to him because I just don't think he wants to be giving out quotes. He just doesn't enjoy that experience. He's just pretty much only basketball, which is absolutely great because you look at guys like Zion Williamson and Cam Reddish, and you gain concern about where their focus is at. I think Romeo Langford has one focus. That's to win basketball games and then make it to the NBA. But yeah, it's a very, like, everyone get out of the way, and when he walks by you, pretty much everyone around you goes, was that Romeo? Oh my God, that was Romeo. Holy moly, that was Romeo Langford. So yeah, it's a weird experience. I think he's just a very calm dude who doesn't really have many other concerns than how to put a basketball in a net.
Let me ask you one final question, Eddie. Kind of a personal question about your experience as a fan. When you came to school at Indiana, were you a fan of Indiana basketball? Or
no.
Okay, so how has that been then for you? You know, coming to Indiana, you know, obviously you've seen, you know, I think maybe one good team, and then obviously a couple teams that, you know, that haven't been very good, and you've been covering the team. Have you become a fan? Have you fully embraced it? Has covering the team as a media kind of left you a little bit at arm's length? How and you also know these guys personally, so how has that kind of developed for you now that you're going into your final season?
So being a member of the media puts you in a unique perspective because you kind of, one, want to prepare yourself for when you're actually in the industry covering teams, so you don't want to be a fan of the team you're covering. With that said, I think every media member roots for the story, and at least in some way, and the story here that you have to root for is a rebuilt Indiana basketball program riding the coattails of Romeo Langford to stardom. So you root for success in that way, and you know your coverage will because your coverage will only do well if this team is great or terrible. There's an average basketball team doesn't do much because it needs to elicit some sort of emotion from your reader or your audience. But always in the back of my head is almost a fandom that's on the back burner. I would say, you know, when like there's an emergency safe that says like break when this happens. Once I graduate, it's a quick break the safe, and you become a complete Indiana basketball fan that embraces everything that you saw in your 4 years and much more. So yeah, it's a unique experience, but I mean, the minute I got here, you get this vibe and this sense of, wow, I feel like I'm in a state that eats, breathes, and sleeps basketball, and which is accurate. So you have no choice other than to attempt to immerse yourself in it. I mean, I've done everything I can to try to learn about the history and the experiences. I've talked to people that have been through these experiences and trying to get their perspective on what it was like. And so it's a in a long-winded answer, it's a beautiful tradition that you have to learn when you get here, or else you're doing it wrong. And my fandom itself is on the back burner waiting to graduate, but it's kind of still there.
Makes sense. Well, his name is Eddie Cotton. Eddie, we really appreciate you joining us. You create content. You create so much content. That's why we called you the hardest working man at IU Student Media. Where's the best place for people to follow you and connect with you during the season? Where should we direct people?
Well, my Twitter is quite successful. I like to think it's a great place to find your obscure takes and your odd comedy. So
observations about Juwan Morgan's Instagram, Tumblr.
Yeah. Oh God, I have to write that story. Oh, I forgot. So much content, man. There's a new story coming out at some point. When I get to it, I gotta like pass some of my classes first. On how everyone on the team reacts to Juwan Morgan's Instagram, because obviously there are warranted reactions. But anyway, you can follow me at Edward Koton 15. That's my real name. I don't use it because it's not as fun as Eddie Cotton, but that's my Twitter handle. So enjoy it, and then you can check out all the content at thehoosiernetwork.com. I appreciate this free plug. Love and plug season.
Absolutely. No, we appreciate the time, Eddie. Great stuff. And we look forward to more of your coverage this season. Are you going to be doing sideline reporting for any future games, the ones that are on BTN Plus?
Maybe. I have no idea. Part of the problem with BTN Plus is that they don't really tell us we're doing the games until quite last minute, until maybe a week or two. So we will find out. But I'll do other stuff. I'll be on BTN for the men's soccer program. If anybody's interested in the best soccer program in the nation, that happens to also be on this campus. And I'll be covering every game. So,
excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Eddie. We appreciate it.
Anytime.
Thanks, Eddie. We appreciate it.
Anytime. I appreciate it myself.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Podcast on the Brink. We always appreciate you being here. To get more from me and from Alex, visit assemblycall.com and insidethehall.com for complete coverage of Indiana University basketball. If you liked this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend or family member who loves IU basketball as much as you do. You can also support the show by leaving a rating and review on iTunes, which helps us get the word out to more IU fans like yourself. We will be back next week with a new episode. Until then, as always, go Hoosiers.